On February 26th of this year, 2012, we took a trip to San Francisco area to meet Ms. Jean Rosenthal Harris. In September of 2011, she had sent us an essay describing her experience with Dr. Wilhelm Reich. Her article was posted in our journal, the Journal of Psychiatric Organ Therapy. The title of her article is How I Became a Case History for Dr. Wilhelm Reich. Before we bring the interview to you, we thought that some background information will be helpful to get acquainted with this experiment, which Ms. Harris was a subject of. The experiment was called Ergonomic Infant Research. On December 16, 1949, Dr. Wilhelm Reich started the Ergonomic Infant Research Center. The center was started with 40 professionals, physicians, nurses, social workers. The task at hand was to study the healthy child, to reach the naturally given plasmatic bioenergetic functioning of the infant. The work was concentrated on the developmental process from the conception to the delivery up to the ages of 5 or 6, the age when formation of basic character structure is completed. Dr. Reich described the details of this experiment in his book, The Children of Future. In the beginning of the book, Dr. Reich says, the fate of human race will be shaped by the character structure of children of the future. In their hands and hearts, the great decisions will lie. They will have to clean up the mess of this 20th century. This concerns us who are living today in the middle of this great mess. During the past century, our parents and grandparents have repeatedly tried to penetrate the wall of social evil with all kinds of social theories, political programs, reforms, resolutions, and revolutions. They have failed miserably. Every time, not one attempt at the improvement of the human lot has succeeded. More than that, or rather worse than that, the misery became deeper and entanglement worse with every new attempt. We have carried chains on our legs while we tried desperately to jump into freedom. We fail, and as generation we shall never make it. The experiment that Dr. Reich started was an attempt to raise children who would be free of these chains from the armor that develops as a consequence of authoritarian, oppressive, and anti-sexual upbringing, which is prevailing universally in almost all cultures. This was an attempt to bring children up respecting their psychosexual development in every stage of their life. Ms. Harris was a case study and was involved in this experiment, which took place in 1950. Ms. Harris, now in her mid-80s, is a vivacious, energetic. She accepted us with warm hospitality in her beautiful home in San Francisco area and described her experience with Dr. Reich. So go ahead and tell us your experience.
Well, I was 23 years old when I met Dr. Reich. I had read all of his work. My husband had been very influenced by his writing. My husband was an early producer of jazz concerts in New York and was responsible for getting Benny Goodman and a lot of other famous musicians into Reichian therapy and helped a lot of the young doctors in New York start their practices that way. And my husband was also busy converting all of his doctor friends to Reich's therapy. And so when we heard of this experiment that was going on, we were very thrilled. And so I went to see Dr. Reich at Dr. Kott's office, which was then in New Jersey. And that was my first meeting with Dr. Reich. And Dr. Reich and Dr. Kott subjected me to a number of tests and body movements and facial expressions. And they declared that I was unarmored and that I was healthy and that I would do fine for their first case history.
Excellent.
And for me, that was a wonderful way for me to begin my life, because I always thought I was a crazy, neurotic girl, and Reich said, that's just part of growing up, it's fine, it's healthy. And so I looked at myself in a whole new way. I began to behave in a different way. And so we then had to find a midwife in New York to deliver the babies, and there were no licensed midwives. Went through a lot of shenanigans, finally found a hospital that would agree to let us stay just one night, and we'd go home the next day. Father was going to be allowed into the delivery room, which was not permitted at that time. I was to nurse the baby. If it was a boy, he was not to be circumcised. As Jews, that was a major decision for us to make. I had to deal with my parents. My husband never told his parents about it.
Your husband was Jewish, right?
Yes.
I saw one of his paintings there.
Yes.
Bar mitzvah.
That's right.
Very good.
But I grew up in a secular family. His grandfather was a Hasidic rabbi. And so this was a really important decision. And at that time, nobody was questioning the validity of circumcision. It was done automatically to all babies in hospitals. So I was a real rebel. Consequently, my other two boys were also not circumcised. My three grandsons are not circumcised. And now it's much more accepted than it was then. And so we had this baby. During the pregnancy, two of Dr. Reich's psychiatric social workers followed me around, and I told them everything that was going on with my life.
You wrote that they were particular. They said that they were asking you every dream, every movement, everything. Yeah, they were very interested in everything.
And my husband was on the road. He was starting a new job and he was traveling. And really missed him. And I had an appointment to see Dr. Reich the day after Ed left. And I said to the doctor, I think I'm coming down with a cold, my throat is raspy, and my eyes are watery. And he said, what's going on in your life? I said, well, Ed went back traveling, and I'm alone in Weehawken, New Jersey. And Dr. Ross said, did you cry when he left? I said, no, I didn't want him to get upset. You know, if he saw me crying, it would upset him. So Dr. Ross said, cry now. So I said, now? He said, yes, cry. So I let out a big cry. And then he said, now swallow. And I swallowed. He said, is your throat still sore? I said, no.
Wow.
So that was an immediate cure.
That's right, that's right.
And so during those 8 or 9 months, we saw a good deal of Reich. Then he moved up to Maine, and I saw the doctors at Forest Hills. And then we had the child, and when the baby was 6 weeks old, Dr. Reich asked us to come to an international conference in Maine at Rangeley. And so we drove, and it was early November, and it was cold and icy, and my parents were so concerned that we were going to drive a 6-week baby through the cold up to Maine, but we did it. And Dr. Reich had us stay in a little guest house on the property, and all the doctors were in a circle, and they had my baby on the table, and they were watching how he was kicking and moving, and then he started crying. And they said, why do you think he's crying? And each had a very elaborate reason for the baby's crying. He has a stomach ache, he's cramping. I said, I think he's hungry. And I picked up the baby, and I discreetly started nursing him, and the room got very quiet. And there were 40 doctors in the room sitting in a circle, and everybody sort of hushed. It was a very touching moment, just watching and listening to this baby suckling. And Reich said, see, the mother knew what the baby wanted.
The mother knew what, oh, okay, so the baby was crying. None of the doctors and you knew. Okay, very good.
The baby was hungry. Then we moved to Lewiston, Maine. My husband's work took him up there, and we were closer to Reich. And so we would go up to Rangeley every few weeks to see them. and we kept in touch. But a year later we moved to California, and that was when Dr. Rock's problems with the FDA began, and that was the end of our relationship with him. I think what's interesting is the child that was this first experimental baby. Dr. Rock wanted me to use an orgone box during the pregnancy. So I would sit in the box a few minutes every day while I was pregnant, and then after the baby was born, I'd take him in the box, and he didn't like it. He'd cry, and I'd go out with him. And I told that to Dr. Rock when we saw him, and he said, oh, the baby has too much energy. He doesn't need that. And this baby came out kicking. He's now 61 years old, and he's still kicking. He is full of energy. No one can match him. He's a remarkable man now. So that was that.
What is he doing now?
He's a painter, an artist.
Okay.
But he also writes, and he's a designer, and he's a builder. He can do many things.
Artist.
When you initially went to Dr. Reich, there were conditions that he put for you. One was that the home delivery and your husband be present, and no circumcision, and immediately after the delivery, the nursing to happen and the baby be in touch with you. These are all things that right now they say that should happen, but then it was all against what that at that time they were thinking.
That's right.
So Dr. Reich was ahead of his time, way ahead of his time, and you were ahead of your time.
That's right.
Because you went to him, you realized that what he was saying was correct against what at that time the conventional medical profession was saying. Yes, that's right. Excellent. So tell us a little bit your impression of Dr. Reich, a little bit what you were seeing in him.
Well, Dr. Reich must have been 58 or 59 then. To me, he seemed like an old man. He was gray-haired and sort of ruddy complexion, and he took himself very seriously. And my husband and I used to joke about it. There had been in the 20s a film about a French doctor. It was called Dr. Mabuse. And Dr. Mabuse was sort of a wild scientist running around in his lab coat. And so between ourselves, we called Dr. Reich Dr. Mabuse. But, and it was interesting to see the society of people that he had around him. They were really disciples and very protective of him and his image. And there was so much politicking among the group around him, and we tried to just absent ourselves from any of that and just observe.
What I wanted to do is to help the children grow more in a healthy way.
That's right.
Prevent armoring, so-called.
That's right.
He named it armoring. He, in his book Children of Future, writes that the children were born and grow up in the early period of their childhood, and they become distorted and armored, and that's why for centuries or even thousands of years we have been struggling with same problems, because human character doesn't change, and people kill themselves, each other, wars, genocides under one pretext or other, but the main problem is the distorted character that should be prevented from childhood, from the beginning, from inception of the fetus and early childhood. And that was what he was trying to do in that experiment, that he wanted you to be there. Yes.
Because if children are exposed to pain instead of pleasure when they're infants, that's what they're conditioned to. And they will seek the pain.
That's right. And the regular social structure is as such that they don't give them a proper psychosexual development.
That's right.
The anti-sexual, oppressive structures of the society, rigid toilet training, and even, you know, before that, actually in the Reich speaks of Freud, he has a nice place. He says that the child, here, I prepared it. It says that when a child is born, it comes out of a warm uterus, 37 degrees centigrade, into 18 or 20 degrees centigrade. That's bad enough. The shock of birth, bad enough. But it could survive that if the following didn't happen. As it comes out, it is picked up by the legs and slapped on the buttocks. The first greeting is a slap. Actually, one of the conditions was that there should be no slapping.
That's right.
And no dangling from the feet.
That's right.
Yeah. The next greeting, it takes away from the mother. Right? Take away from the mother. I want you to listen here. It will sound incredible in 100 years, and today it is almost incredible, you know. Yeah. Take it away from the mother. The mother must not touch or see the baby. The baby has no body contact after had 9 months of the body contact at a very high temperature, what we call organotic body energy contact. The field action between mother and child, mother and fetus, between them, the warmth, the heat. Then the Jews introduced something about 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, and that is circumcision. And by the way, Dr. Reich himself was of Jewish, you know.
Yeah, I know.
You know. And your husband was Jewish too, yeah. I don't know why they introduced it. It's still a riddle. Take the poor penis, take a knife, right, and start cutting. And everybody says it doesn't hurt. Everybody says no, it doesn't hurt. That's an excuse, of course, a subterfuge. They say that the sheets of the nerves are not yet developed. Therefore, the sensation in the nerves is not yet developed. Therefore, the child doesn't feel a thing. No, that's a murder. Circumcision is one of the worst treatment of children. And your children were not circumcised, you say. And what happened to them? Just you look at them. They can't talk to you. They just cry. What they do is shrink. They contract, get away into an inside, away from the ugly word. I express it very crudely, but you understand what I mean, doctor. He was talking here with Dr. Eisler or someone who was interviewing Dr. Reich. Now that's the greeting. Taking it away from the mother. Mother must not see it. 24 hours or 48 hours. I actually remember those days that they were taking children from the mother. And,
that's right.
You know,
put them in a separate room.
Eat nothing, right? Penis is cut. And then comes the worst. This poor child, poor infant, tries always to stretch out and to find some warmth, something to hold on. It goes to the mother, puts its lips on the mother's nipple, and what happened? The mother's nipple is cold, doesn't erect, or milk doesn't come, or the milk is bad. And that's quite general. It's not one case in 1,000.
And in those days, mothers' breasts were bound, the milk was squeezed out and thrown away, and the babies were given formula in a bottle to drink.
Wow. Yeah. So what does the infant do? How does it respond to that? How does it have to respond to that bioenergetically? It can't come to you and say, oh, doctor, listen, I'm suffering so much and so much. It just cries. Yeah. This is in orgonomy. They give most importance to body language, what body says, what the movements, and rather than the words. Yeah. And finally it gives up. It gives up, says no. It doesn't say no in words, but it is the emotional situation. And we orgonomists know it. We get it out from patients. We get it out of their emotional structure, out of their behavior, not out of their words. Words can express it. Oh, I'm sorry, he says that words cannot express it. Here, in the very beginning, the spite develops, the no develops, a big no of humanity. And you ask why the world is in mess now, you know. That's right. Actually, I usually do some things that my wife tells me not to do,
Yes.
but I do anyhow.
Such as?
I sometimes find some proverbs or sayings or poetry examples, ancient Persian examples, Iranian, and this is a poetry that one of the Persian poets, Hafiz, very famous, says it. I'll read it in Persian first, and then it's a short poetry. He says, آدمی در این دنیای خاکی نمی آید به بار، دنیای دیگر بباید ساخت و از نو آدمی. Now the translation will be, it's my translation, I'm not a poet, but it says that human, worthy of his name as human, is not created on our earth. A new planet is needed, and the human anew. Because the people who are born and grow up here, somehow, because of the structure of the society, they get distorted. They get unhealthy, not armored, so-called. And then out of armor, all types of things start to live.
And Hafiz lived 500 years ago.
This was about 500 or 600 years ago. But great thinkers think alike, most of them. Yeah, they can see deeper. Very good. So tell us anything else you want to say. We are fortunate that we have you. Your article was very nice. It's in our journal and the website. So.
Well, I think those early years with Ra influenced the rest of my life. Gave me a deeper understanding of humans. I went into business for myself when I moved to California and was successful at what I did because I always felt I knew people and knew how to talk to them and understood their fears and their anxieties and their desires, all of that. So that was a good beginning. On one of the first dates I had with my husband, he took me to hear A.S. Neal at the New School for Social Research.
Yes.
And he was speaking about Summerhill, the new school he had just opened in England. And I thought, this is strange. This is an early date, and my husband's taking me to hear about child rearing.
Yeah.
But I loved what O'Neill said about giving children free rein, letting them self-regulate themselves, not putting them at desks and lecturing them for 8 hours. Let them go out and build and learn on their own. And that's pretty much what we did with the raising of our 3 boys. We didn't stress academics too much. We did stress their being outside, learning from nature, being part of the world, having sympathy for all. And they grew up into 3 great men. That's the basis of the whole thing.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. In the article that you sent to us, to Journal of Psychiatric Hormone Therapy, you didn't elaborate on what happened to them later. So now it's good to hear that they all are successful, healthy.
None of them has ever worked for anybody else. They've all been strong, independent people who like to do their own thing, and we've encouraged them to do it. The oldest one, because of the nature of my husband's work at that time, and before we moved to California, we were traveling. And so by the time he was 2 years old, he must have lived in 30 different environments. New furniture, new faces, new rooms to adjust to. And so he grew up loving to travel. He has friends all over the world and is able to meet people and immediately communicate with them and get through. And I think those early experiences conditioned him for this life of continual change. The other 2 were born in Walnut Creek in the same house, lived here, and they don't live very far away now. But they all have found their own voices. And are good parents, too.
Yeah, very good. Of course. Yeah. Of course. Actually, parents and educators, they transfer their structure to their offsprings, their children, their students, and then the problems go from one generation to other. And that's what Dr. Raif was trying to do with that experiment, Ergonomic Infant Research Center, and that I think that worked for a couple of years, and then they stopped that experiment. You know, they stopped the experiment because even the best of the people that he was selecting, he felt that were not able to tolerate that task. But then later on he got into troubles too, and you said that in your essay you said that you couldn't imagine that 7 years later he will get in prison. Yeah. Very. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking with you, and we hope that we will be able to,
we can elaborate on this, of course.
Okay, very good.
How about some soup?
That's very good. Okay.